All right. First rule of this channel is we do not talk about this channel. Before I get going, a little housekeeping stuff. So the video I did yesterday, the running back value rankings, I never intended it to get on the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, and uh I got okay feedback, I guess. The back end stuff is saying that it's not particularly engaging, but it says it's all subscribers. So if you guys like it, I got a lot of comments and I got a lot of thumbs up. I never intended this channel to get anywhere near as big. I'm still not really putting out any effort. I'm starting to put out some effort. If there's some growth, then I'm going to probably have to break out my video editing stuff and actually maybe do some videos, because it's becoming more cumbersome to do the unedited versions than it would just be to edit videos. So anyway, that's kind of what's going on. Like I said, I didn't really like how yesterday's video came out, but I did learn some stuff. The idea would be to understand value after 4 weeks and then reevaluate it around the trade deadline for fantasy football for most leagues. I think it's about week 11. The big thing with my rankings, the value is I don't want to be overvaluing a guy in my lineup, or if someone comes around knocking. I want to understand what I'm plugging into my lineup week to week, especially during the bye weeks. Wide receivers are very kind of hit or miss to evaluate. I actually, the reason why I have Gabe Davis up is when I was doing these rankings, I actually put them in 2 different categories and didn't realize it until the end. Boom bust wide receiver 2 and boom bust wide receiver 3. I'm going to explain why when I get to those two areas, but there's a lot going on. The game has changed. There's more wide receivers playing. There's a lot of matchups involved. Things like is the corner going to travel, or is he going to stay on one side of the field? Like those type of things that get really wonky. Sometimes you just got to play the best guy regardless. And there's just a lot of variables to break down kind of how wide receivers should be ranked. There's a lot to do. In the first place was like just target share of a high volume passing offense. That's probably good or just okay. And then you can look at like design passing routes to the guy, the quick game, or the short routes like the dump offs where you get like the ability to break tackles and yak yards after catch. Then you have intermediate routes. You'll hear the term like work in the middle of the field with the in-breaking routes. You have deep shots to the outside. These are less, there's a lesser chance that these are going to hit. They're low probability routes, but they're the ones that from a fantasy perspective are the best, right? And then the other ones, obviously the super best ones are the red zone shots, because those are the touchdowns. So anyway, without further ado, these are my wide receiver value rankings. It's going to be long. There's a lot of them in there, and I'm going to continue to break this down a little bit. I do have one thing I want to talk about. So we can look at the overall pass attempts after 4 weeks and can kind of get an idea of like what are the higher volume passing offenses. So you have like Matt Stafford up there at 166, Kirk Cousins at 157. And then way down here, I think it was 107, you can see Lamar Jackson as only 105 after 4 games, to give an idea. So certain offenses we just kind of want to stay away from, and certain offenses we kind of want to get as many targets as we can. So like Matt Stafford and the Rams, Kirk Cousins, like they can probably support like 3, maybe even 4 guys. And Lamar Jackson is barely going to be able to support 1, more than likely. And we'll get to that down the line. So to start off like with the elite tier, before I can just continue to ruin this. So Kirk Cousins with his number 2 pass attempts, KJ Osborne in that offense, he's got 91% snaps, 97% snaps, 93% snaps, 83% snaps. He's got 6 targets, 3 targets, 2 targets. We're going to talk about Jordan Addison later, but you could just see with just such a high volume passing attack and KJ Osborne getting so many routes, he's going to have a certain degree of fantasy relevance, whether we like it or not. This is just how it's going to go. So, and I think this is full PPR settings on my fake league. Just with that, like he's hovering around like this low end wide receiver 2 range, because he's gotten 2 touchdowns on this very low efficiency, lots of routes. So moving forward from that, like the elite tier, there's only one guy. We all know who it is, Justin Jefferson. Again, sometimes it's better to have good pieces or great pieces of okay offenses. I do have some of the advanced metrics from Fantasy Pros. Like I said, I tend to eyeball this stuff. I don't really look at it. And Justin Jefferson is just going to get everything. I mean, he gets red zone targets. He gets all the work. I was a little concerned in the offseason with Justin Jefferson that like Hawkinson and Addison were actually going to take targets away from him. And it did the opposite, which from a fantasy perspective is what we want, is if teams are going to take away Hawkinson and Addison because they kind of have to, then, Jefferson is just being the beneficiary of being a target funnel. So the other thing to look at with him is, percent of team targets, and Justin Jefferson is at 30%. And that's really high. Like 20% is good. 30% is that like above elite tier. Like it's just really difficult to sustain that through a season. And you can see the guys that are kind of in that range as I pull those up, like Devontae Adams, and we'll talk about him, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, Keenan Allen. Like when you get above 30 or even near 30, like you're in a very hard to understand area of football, because like basically every play you're just letting everybody know that you're going to throw it to one guy. Like too bad. So moving on from Justin Jefferson, we have Stefon Diggs. I don't have a lot of notes on some of these guys. Like it should be evident, like he's in a high volume passing offense. He's the one. There's a little bit of concern that he was going to have his targets taken away by Gabe Davis in some games and Dalton Kincaid, and it hasn't really happened. And about the only reason why I have him still in the sub-elite category is because, it's going to, like, there's no way, two ways about it. He's going to get some of his targets taken away when they actually play teams that are going to force them not to throw the ball to Stefon Diggs. The next guy is Keenan Allen. I had him as a just inside the top 10. I thought he was very undervalued going into the season. And he's lived up to the hype. The one outlier is the Las Vegas game. And I'm not really concerned about that because, again, from a fantasy perspective, sometimes I just don't care how the sausage is made. Like good players are going to get you there, and it's don't overthink it. But high volume passing offense, he's limited in what he does because he's a little older now, and he was always kind of a little on the limited side, but he's so good at what he does that like you're just going to get that volume and be happy that you get it. Devontae Adams, I would have him in the elite tier if it wasn't for one thing, and that one thing is going to be his injury that he has right now. The game with the I'm trying to move my mic if you're wondering what the noise is. The game that he had with Aiden O'Connell really just shows how good he is. He's not going to be matchup or quarterback dependent most of the time, unless it's Derek Carr. But anyway, like that's why I would have him there, and I just have him slightly downgraded because of the injury, and I don't really know what's going on with it at this point. Tyreek Hill, that I actually have in my wide receiver 1 category, and again, you may not agree with this, but there are going to be weeks where he just goes away. That's kind of always what's happened in his career. Anecdotally, for me, like I had him a few years back, and I was trying to trade him the entire time. My co-manager kept telling me no, because I was like, he's a boom bust guy. And I was like, we need to get him off our roster before everybody realizes how overvalued he is. And he's kind of turned into more of a possession guy, which is good. But he's going to have Jalen Waddle. And with the guys that are in the backfield, Mostert and A-Chain, there's going to be a problem with where the scoring opportunities come from. That's why I would have him outside of even the sub-elite range, because I just, this is me projecting. I just think it's going to happen. The last game against Buffalo kind of showed it. From a analytics perspective, if we just look at ranks, I mean, he's the number 1 guy. He should actually, from Fantasy Pros perspective, he should be ranked above Justin Jefferson. And I doubt that, but like, you do you. This is just kind of like how I view the guys. Like, I think he's going to cannibalize. He's going to have targets cannibalized by him, just as he's going to cannibalize targets. And, Jalen Waddle's coming up. Nico Collins, he's in my wide receiver 1 tier. Everybody's raving about him. You can go watch tape on him. I don't really have any tape on him. This is a Nico Collins video. I want pieces of good offenses that are ascending because I can probably get them for cheaper than what they're actually valued at. I would probably I did have him higher for a second, and then I moved him down into the regular wide receiver 1 tier. And that's because of week 3 against Jacksonville. Like, Your guys have to be able to get you there. So from a fantasy perspective, when they don't, there's a problem. And there's only so many games that you can come up with excuses. And this early, there may be kind of a problem with him and Tank Dell just getting the targets because, again, I don't care how the sausage is made, but if a guy's going to take targets away from somebody else, I care. The big thing with Nico Collins is he's getting a lot of the valuable in-breaking intermediate routes that lead to those chunk plays that are good for fantasy. And then, he's going to get the red zone work. So that's where he should be. And if it's a good offense, that's where he should be at. I can see him going up as the season goes on, just like I can see Tyreek Hill going up. CeeDee Lamb, I had to move him down. I had him sub-elite from last year. But this year, I did think there were going to be some problems with the targets. I didn't think there was going to be a problem where the defense is so good they just don't need to throw to him. But he should still be here. If someone comes knocking, understand why they're knocking on a guy like CeeDee Lamb. It's because they think that they can buy him low right now. And it may not be a bad idea. It's just that's why I would have him ranked a tier lower. Jamar Chase, same thing. In the offseason, there were some questions. I never would have had him in the elite tier from a fantasy perspective. This is not a football channel. This is a fantasy channel. Don't listen to anything I say. No legal advice. The issue with Jamar Chase is he was always probably going to be cannibalized by T. Higgins in that offense. Well, why did I move him down from sub-elite to elite? Is because the offense isn't good right now. And really until you can predictively throw him in your lineup and know that you're going to get the possibility for an elite outcome, there's no point on pretending that he's anything more than he is. And he only has that one real game this year, week 3 against the Rams, and then Tennessee was, in the range of being a wide receiver 1. So, I do think he's really good at football. Again, the concerns of the offense are the problem. And then without T. Higgins, again, this is the double-edged sword. Without T. Higgins to draw coverage and letting him do what he does, but if T. Higgins were there, it would cannibalize targets. So right now, it's really kind of hard to evaluate him. I just think as a wide receiver 1. And, if you're speculating, the Bengals could turn it around. If you're speculating, sell high. And then the final guy is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Again, this is another guy that I would have had higher in the offseason. And the problem behind Amon-Ra right now is I just think that there may be too little targets to go around between Laporta, Reynolds, Jameson Williams is going to come back. Gibbs is going to get his. So that would be why I would put him there. And then the other thing is he's got an injury problem. So moving him down the rankings, and this is only going to put him at, let me count, I think running or wide receiver 9. So that's not too bad of a downgrade based off everything, but that's why he would be there. I'm playing with my marking again if you hear noises. So anyway, moving on from this tier, this is my wide receiver 1s, elite, sub-elite, and elite. Moving on to my wide receiver 2s. I was a little surprised that where I found A.J. Brown and Devonta when I was looking at the analytics and their production, they haven't been cannibalizing each other as much as I thought. And that's because they're cannibalizing Dallas Goedert. If you're wondering why. So I can't put them any lower just because I would say I don't like them from a fantasy perspective because, from a production standpoint, they've just been getting you there. So there's no reason to downgrade them. They're high-end 2s. Both him and Devonta, I have them right next to each other, if you're wondering. They're just high-end 2s. That's where they are great. I still think that you can't trust the Eagles offense. They're going to have their weeks where they cut into each other and they disappear. We've already seen it with both of them, but otherwise they've been really dependable guys. So they got to be where they're at. DK Metcalf I have here. And again, sometimes you don't have to care how the sausage is made. He's just going to get it done. And so far he's gotten it done as a very high-end 2. I still think there's a chance that he disappears in a couple of games, but since we haven't seen it yet and it's a good offense, there's no point on undervaluing him just because reasons. I do have Marquise Hollywood Brown here in the solid high-end 2. This has to do with how well Josh Dobbs is playing in the last 3 games. And this is a guy that I would want to buy at this value. There's a good chance that he could regress backwards, but this is the epitome of a buy low if someone doesn't understand what you're going to go get. Like, it's hard to shake a stick at 10 targets twice in the first 4 games, and some of these are vertical shots downfield, and then another 7 targets. So again, I don't always have to know how the sausage is made. They're telling me it's a better offense than I thought it was going to be, and he's getting volume. And that can sometimes just be enough to say why. And in this case, like I said, I could be buying low. I also need to understand when someone comes knocking for him that he may be a high-end wide receiver too, from a value standpoint. The next guy, Mike Evans, this one was a little harder to evaluate because of his week 2 blow up with the Bears, and then he got hurt in week 4. Got me there in week 1, got me there in week 3. Sometimes I don't need to know how the sausage is made. I think that the Bucs offense may be overvalued, but it could just be good enough to support it. Remember, sometimes it's about having great pieces in okay situations, and if he's the guy there at his value, then I would understand that. So valuing as a high-end 2, considering that I could have put him as a 1 and I could have downgraded him more because of the injury, I think this is a fair place to put him. Cooper Kupp I have as a high-end 2 right now, and that's mostly based on the guy that we're going to have right next to him, Puka Nacua. I just don't know how they're going to integrate with each other into the offense. It is the number 1 volume passing offense. I've heard some of the other pundits talk about the fact that they think that Kyren Williams targets are going to be the one that gets cannibalized. I just don't know. Usually the guy that is the beneficiary of targets is the running back and not vice versa. But I don't know how to value these guys. Puka's been too good to drop him much lower. Cooper Kupp has been, a fantasy MVP before, and he was en route to a legendary season last year. So it's really hard to put him anyplace else until we get the data of them working together. And then finally, the guy in this tier, I have to go with Chris Olave. I probably would have had him as a wide receiver 1 based off of the first 3 weeks, but last week he didn't get there. And it doesn't matter how the sausage is made sometimes. But in this case, like when we look at a guy like Devontae Adams that gets you there regardless, and there has to be a reason that I would be a little worried about rolling out a Chris Olave after last week. Even though I like the first 3 weeks, and there is a limitation to his game. He gets a lot of air yards, and he tends not to be able to convert them. So there should be more of a history of these massive spike weeks, and they've never been there. And my understanding of why is because teams know how to play him. He's not a physical player, and being physical against him will take him out of his game. So, but he's still a high-end wide receiver too. I'm not downgrading him very much because of that. I did have a question in the comments that I didn't quite understand about value. And I think you can roll out like 2 high-end wide receiver 2s and go knife fight with anybody's other lineup. I don't think these guys, I don't think you have to be screwing around too much with your lineup to give yourself a chance to win. Understand what your lineup is from a value standpoint. If I have 2 high-end 2s and I have, 3 wide or running back 1s, I can probably get away with not having to upgrade my wide receivers very much, right? If I'm struggling at running back, then yes, the lack of production from my running or wide receiver 2s are going to hurt me. But again, you have who you have, and even in that comp, you could probably get away with some of that by just having one of the elite quarterbacks or figuring out how to Frankenstein that position. So that may be something I could talk about later on. The next tier that I have is the boom bust wide receiver 2s, and this is an issue of trust. Again, Jalen Waddle hasn't got there so far this year, but that's what we drafted him to be. We kind of knew that there was a chance that Tyreek Hill was going to eat into him. It just hasn't happened the other way around yet. But I would have a degree of trust or problem with trust with all these guys. Good high volume passing offense. God, I want pieces of that. I'm just going to get burned sometimes. And again, the other thing is the injury does kind of concern me. Guys tend to stay injured. You're never going to be healthy. You may have heard that with football. By the end of the year, everybody's hurt. The next guy up is DJ Moore. Again, with the analytics attached to Justin Fields means I have no idea what's going to happen every week, but he's one of my favorite guys in football. I think he's like vastly underrated from what he can do. And he's just always had bad quarterback play. And in this case, you can see that he's almost, quarterback, independent with Justin Fields. But again, probably a matchup problem. And when I look at the guys that he's going to be matched up against, Washington, I think they're playing as I'm recording this, Minnesota, Las Vegas, the Chargers, maybe the Saints. I have a stretch where I should be able to maximize his value, and then if you're really concerned with him, I can kick him. So having him in this boom bust wide receiver 2 range, I think is fair assessment of what he's going to do over these next few weeks. After this, I have Debo. Probably could be valued slightly higher because he's unique with the amount of carries he's going to get. But again, he put up basically nothing last week. Him and Ayuk and Kittle and are going to cannibalize each other. The main cog in that offense to have is CMC. So you know he can have those weeks. He did it in week 2, week 3, but you also know you're playing with fire. He's going to put up, the 0.6 he did last week. And the same thing with Ayuk. Here's the thing that I've been kind of avoiding with Ayuk, and you can just see the sheer limited amount of targets that he has relative to everybody else. I heard a stat the other day involving Brandon Ayuk, and the 50-50 balls downfield, those lower probability shots that are usually about 50%, he's at 90%. That's why he's so efficient so far. I'm trying to find where the targets are. So Brandon Ayuk is only at 20 targets, and you see the other guys in the range of where he is on Fantasy Pros, him being wide receiver 10. He's only got 20 targets, and everybody else is in the vicinity of like 30 or more. So again, playing with fire, those guys have a tendency to come crashing back to earth. And you kind of saw that in week 2. He's been injured. I think this is fair. T. Higgins, I never thought he should have been going as high as he was going in the preseason. I would normally have him as like a high end 2, maybe. But he tends to cannibalize Jamar Chase just like the other way around. So again, leaving him in this tier is probably really fair. Again, the problem of the Bengals offense, and if I moved him down a tier, it would mean he's solid and he's a set and forget guy. So even if the Bengals offense was better, I don't even think he would belong in that tier. And just moving him further down into the wide receiver 3 range might not be unfair, but I just couldn't do it. If you're wondering, I have Calvin Ridley in this tier also of boom bust wide receiver 2s. It looked like he was going to be a win. I had him as a high-end wide receiver 2 with upside coming into the season, and it just hasn't happened yet. He's been able to get me there one time because of a touchdown catch. He's been disappointing 2 other weeks. He had what looked like he was going to be an elite target in a good offense, but it just hasn't happened. So at this point, like, he could go either way. He could fall out and just be this boom bust 3, or he could claw back up into near wide receiver 1 status by the end of the year. The next guy I have up in this category is Tank Dell. And again, this has to do with the ascending offense. That's the Texans and his snaps and how they're utilizing him. And he's going to get targets down the field. They're not really using him underneath very much, but you got to like what you're getting out of him. And at this point, like, he should be in your lineup knowing that he could give you basically nothing, or he could, compete with anybody else in that range. The other guy that was a little surprising to me that I had this high was Jordan Addison. I thought he was going to be a low end to solid wide receiver 2, but then nothing against Carolina. Otherwise, he's been able to get you there in half point PPR, full PPR. Got a couple touchdown catches. There was a lot to like up until last week, so I would still be a little hesitant of how this is going to be going forward. If for no other reason, then it's an okay offense because Kirk Cousins is going to have his Kirk Cousins weeks. And then finally, this was interesting. I originally just ranked Gabe Davis as a boom bust wide receiver 3 because that's what he kind of is. He's, I feel like I know this guy at this point. But then when I was looking at his production, I was like, okay, well, he's had 3, wide receiver 2 weeks outside of the week 1 bust against a good Jets defense. So then I was looking at the analytics behind him, and I was really actually surprised to see that Gabe Davis, from a pure analytics standpoint, is wide receiver 18 overall. Now, can I see him falling back to earth and being, a wide receiver 3, a boom bust wide receiver 3 that you just, if you are going to roll him out, he's either going to win you your week or just give you a sub 40-degree day? Absolutely. But at this rate, because of the volume of the Buffalo offense, I would probably expect a little bit more out of him from a week-to-week standpoint. And we haven't seen Dalton Kincaid really move into that role that I thought he was going to be in as that backside slot. And without that happening so far, not to say that it won't, Gabe Davis is going to continue to get the benefit of them having to take away that seam route, which is good for him. So anyway, moving on to my next tier, I have as just rated as solid wide receiver 2s, just set and forget. Don't worry about it. They're going to have some disappointing weeks. They're going to have some 40-degree days. They're going to have some boom weeks, but you just kind of like have to understand what they're getting there. So week 4, I'm just going to throw out, wasn't good. Normally I would say you would want a wide receiver that is, matchup or quarterback independent, but in this case, watching that tape, I can understand why it wouldn't matter. Anyway, he's been very good this year with Deshaun Watson, and I think when Watson's back after the bye week, you're going to get more of those very consistent wide receiver 2 days with some disappointing weeks and some upside weeks. It's just, you know what you're getting, just leave them there. Understand when it's bad, it's going to get good. Understand when it's good, it could get better. So that's why I would have him at the top of this tier. The next guy is Michael Pittman. Didn't like week 4. There's been some wonkiness when it comes to Gardner Minshew and Anthony Richardson. But overall, I think that he's just going to be a guy that I understand is going to have the weeks when they're there, and they're not going to be other weeks. And I'm just going to leave him as my wide receiver 2, and I'm not going to play around with it. That's the long and short of it. Not going to have a high ADOT, but I think Anthony Richardson is going to grow into this role. So there's going to be some boom weeks. And then when Anthony Richardson decides that he just wants to run all day long, especially with Jonathan Taylor coming back, there might be some bust weeks. But again, I think he's just in that range of just, I'm going to forget about him and let him do his thing. And it's the same thing with Romeo Doubs. A little surprised to see him here, but like when the guys find ways to get you there, if he can be a red zone bully, if he can be a downfield contested catch guy, if he can work underneath, I'm just going to leave him in my lineup and I'm going to forget about him. Same thing with Adam Thielen. I'm not particularly happy with this. I don't think that they're in a good offense, but like if he's the only guy that can do it and you're going to get volume, this is kind of where he has to be. Still, got to know that it's not a good offense. So I'm going to have to be willing to understand that there's going to be some bad weeks along with the boom. I have McLaurin here. The more I see Sam Howell, and hopefully this ages well, the more I see Sam Howell just pushing the ball downfield, which is something that we would like to see with Scary Terry because of all the athletic measurables and what this guy can do. Just having a guy that lets him go do things. And again, this is why Taylor Heineke was so good for him last year. Just letting him go do things is always good. I think it was Taylor Heineke. It was either Taylor Heineke or Carson Wentz that would just throw it up to him and let him go do things. Anyway, the last guy in this tier that I would have as a solid wide receiver 2 is Christian Kirk. They paid him to be a solid wide receiver 2. That's what he's been. Disappointing week 1, but after that, like if this is going to be the guy that's doing the stuff week in and week out on what could be an okay offense, then that's what you're going to get out of him. I'm not going to be surprised when he burns me, but I also need to understand that this is what they paid him to be. Finally, Michael Thomas is, or I shouldn't say finally, in the next tier. This is the low-end wide receiver 2s. So Michael Thomas is here, and I do have some analytics, I think, with him from the red zone target standpoint. The guys that are getting their work, and he hasn't been paying it off. I think he's got 5 red zone targets. Yeah, Michael Thomas has 5 red zone targets. So the other analytics aren't there to support him, but he's been getting there by just this low volume play. So he's been hovering around that low end wide receiver 2. And since he's getting red zone targets, he's going to have a spike week. So he's probably a little undervalued. As I have written down in my notes, a mix of 40-degree days, maybe some booms, but you're mostly looking at a few busts. And that's what you're going to get out of Michael Thomas. But there are the red zone targets. So I have a big asterisk next to Jacoby Myers next. Like he looked really good with what's his face, Jimmy Garoppolo, because there was essentially a target funnel to just him and Devontae Adams, which I don't care from a fantasy football perspective as long as he's getting the funnel. And then last week with Aiden O'Connell, he didn't get it. So if Jimmy G's back, you could probably fire him up and just go like, I know what I'm going to get out of him. But there's a big asterisk there. It's a hard sample size between the injury and then his injury and the Jimmy G injury. So next at this rate, I kind of have Cortland Sutton. Again, bad offense, but if he gets me there, I don't really need to always know how the sausage is made. And he's been able to get me there 3 times with touchdown passes. So that's all I really care about. They don't have a lot of analytics behind it because the Broncos aren't good, but from a production standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint, he's got me there. I have Josh Palmer here. This is speculative. The reason why I have Josh Palmer here is because of that last week's snap share, those targets, high volume passing offense. Yeah, I think this is a fair point for the number 2 in a high volume passing offense to be. Next, I have Chris Godwin. The Bucks have been better than we thought they were going to be. Chris Godwin hasn't necessarily been that. He got the beneficiary, I think, of Mike Evans being out at the end of last week against New Orleans. But overall, like, if Baker Mayfield can continue to do Baker Mayfield things and he can hover, he's going to get a little bit of extra work every once in a while, and he's going to fall in the end zone. So, he's still a wide receiver 2. I have Michael Wilson being here speculatively. I like Josh Dobbs a lot. I'm going to probably talk about him a lot more in my rankings for quarterback. But for the time being, just off of last week, speculating to where he could be, they kind of need this power X in their offense. And again, someone asked like why I would think that the targets are going to be there, because again, like, this is not going to be a high volume passing offense more than likely, and I don't know how many guys it can support. And he's a rookie, so he has the possibility of disappearing at any given time. So just from a pure standpoint of targets, and again, those are very efficient because you went 7 for 7, so those could drop to 7 and 3. And that may not pull him out of the wide receiver 2 range, but it also could be a bust week. So there isn't a large enough sample size based off of what I was anticipating at the start of the season. I would have liked to see him hit the ground running, and this was just something to slowly build into as the season went on. But again, I could see him falling into a wide receiver 3 range, or I could see him actually moving up and taking control of the offense and moving Hollywood Brown down a little bit. The next guy I have in this is Garrett Wilson. One of the best pure football players, wide receivers there are. It's just a bad quarterback situation, bad coaching situation. I liked how the second half of the Chiefs game went. That's why I have him up this high, and this is a great matchup against Denver. So if he should be able to get there this week, if he can't, that's probably the end of the road for him. But the main thing to look at is it's hard. I would have had him as a wide receiver 3 before this, but just the end of last game, I have some optimism, so I think it's fair to put him here speculatively as the season goes on. Tyler Lockett, it's really hard to move Tyler Lockett out of the wide receiver 2 range. He's going to have his weeks. Hopefully, if you drafted him, you understand that he's going to have his weeks, and he's going to burn you on a few other weeks. He's already kind of done both of those things, but this is probably the way. Just he's almost a set it and forget it wide receiver. I have some questions going into the second half with Seattle when it comes to what their identity is going to be, if they're just going to lean on Kenneth Walker, if JSN is going to become a thing. I do have some questions. I think Jake Bobo, I'm going to talk about him down the line, where he's 31. I could see his routes being cannibalized, his targets being cannibalized down as the season goes on. And again, this may be a good offense, but it doesn't mean that it's going to translate to opportunities for the players in it, or all of them at the very least. And again, why I have Jaden Reed here is he's been rather consistent from a points per game standpoint. He is getting design touches. It's going to be a low volume offense, which means at this point, you could say there's 5 major targets in this offense, and there's going to probably be weeks where he gets his, and there's going to be weeks where he doesn't. But I still think he's in this range of being a wide receiver 2 at this rate because of what he's been able to do after 4 weeks. Moving on to Josh Reynolds, wrong tab. Josh Reynolds. This is a coaching thing. Sometimes when guys do what you want them to do and they just continue to be productive, you just kind of leave it there and let it happen. And that's kind of what we've seen with Josh Reynolds. So week 3 was an injury thing. He played and gutted through it. But outside of that, Josh Reynolds has been a consistent wide receiver 2. I don't know how much work Jameson Williams is going to take away from him. But again, from a coaching standpoint, if a guy's doing what you're asking him to do and he's just going to continue to do it, then I would guess that the production is going to be there. And Jared Goff, or Goff, whatever, he's going to. It's a good offense. There's going to probably be enough opportunity to go around, and I just suspect that he's going to continue to do what he's been doing when he's healthy. Tutu Atwell, I still have as a wide receiver 2, a low end wide receiver 2. And the reason behind this is I kind of suspect that he's going to continue to be participate in the offense in the same way that I said. Sometimes coaches just like what guys are doing and this keep having them do it in good offenses. That's what I kind of think is going to happen with Tutu Atwell. They move him around the formation. They get him opportunities. You can see in the first 4 weeks, he's had 8 targets, 9 targets, 9 targets, 9 targets. I don't really think that's going to go away, even with Cooper Kupp coming in. I think Van Jefferson is going to be on the outside looking in on that one. And again, if I were to speculate, I could see that Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are going to kind of eat into each other a little bit more, and Tutu Atwell is going to continue to get what he's getting. Moving on from him, I have George Pickens. This is a kind of tough because at certain points we've seen what we want out of George Pickens. It's hard to say that what may be the number 1 guy who's put up the weeks that he has in week 2 and week 3 is just going to completely disappear. So putting him into the wide receiver 3 range, I think is a little unfair. So leaving him here at least until we know what's going on. New quarterback, there's just too many variables to really move him too far down and not expect him to put egg on my face in the future, if that makes any sense. And the same reason why I have Deontay Johnson there. Too many targets last year. When he comes back from an injury to kind of move him in the wide receiver 3 range, I would just leave him there and expect that he's going to get at least some of those targets back. I don't know who is going to be the quarterback between Trubisky and Pickett. I just don't know. I think it's Trubisky. I don't even know. Nick Westbrook Akine, this kind of surprised me a little bit when I was doing the analytics. Like, he's kind of operated with a high snap share, and he's gotten his targets. I don't really know what happened in week 3, but again, like, if he's getting me there and I'm getting the production, I'm not really going to question it. Sometime he's probably the wide receiver to own out of the group from a low end 2 standpoint if this continues. And then I have DeAndre Hopkins right there. And then again, this is just targets in a bad passing offense. Where you're looking at 13, 5, 7, and 6, like, he's gonna hover right around there of that really low floor with the possibility of getting in the end zone. And that's about the end of all my wide receiver 2s. Again, from a fantasy standpoint, I'm more likely to roll out a wide receiver and hope for points than I am to roll out a running back 3 and hope for points. So in this case, my wide receiver 3s, these are the safe floor wide receiver 3s. I have Zay Flowers, and until they can figure out if he's going to be this gadget guy or this deep shot guy, or they put it all together, I just don't know where to put him at. And with Mark Andrews being the de facto number 1 in Baltimore, I would not put him much higher with as low of a passing volume as Baltimore's had so far. So I think this is a very safe. If I'm rolling him out there as a flex, I can feel safe about it. If I'm rolling him out there as a wide receiver 2, I think there's a little bit too much doubt moving forward. And again, I have Elijah Moore in this range. Just the usage before Deshaun Watson got injured. I'm pretty sure he's going to be able to hit those marks from a overall opportunity standpoint. And then I have Jerry Jeudy in this same range. You know, there's enough volume there, even if it's a bad offense, that he's going to probably be able to hit his marks. I have Robert Woods here. Again, pieces of good offenses or ascending offenses, he's probably going to have a relatively safe floor week to week, even though I can't really hope for some of these guys to have higher ceilings. And some of these guys are going to have very non-predictive touchdowns. I have Josh Downs here. And again, this is just snap share with opportunity. He's going to get you points. You can plug him in, and he's probably not going to give you an offer. That's about all I can say about putting him here. Same thing. This surprised me a little bit with Curtis Samuel. A lot of opportunity, and I think he has rushing work too. A lot of opportunity to look at. And then same thing with Jahan Dotson. This is maybe an ascending offense, even if it's never going to be good. It might just be okay. And 9 targets is something not to shake a stick at. I can plug him in and know that there's some type of floor there, which is something I like. And that's the same reason why I have to put Wan'Dale Robinson. It's really bad Giants offense, but like, with his 2 weeks back, he's gotten 5 targets and 6 targets. And I imagine if this is how the Giants offense is going to run right now, very low floor, but you can kind of guess or count on it. The next group I have are my boom bust wide threes. Rashid Shaheed, I have in my notes. If you look at the schedule after New Orleans, Houston, Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Chicago, Minnesota before the bye. And then after that, Detroit might be kind of a higher scoring game. And then the Rams in the fantasy semis. There's enough there that there might be some predictability to him, on top of the fact that he has been able to find a way and be efficient when he's had the opportunity. So that's why I would have him in this range of guys that I would be more willing to throw out if I needed to try and generate points and I was less concerned with the floor. And I have Christian Watson here right now. Again, only 1 game sample size. I never thought he was going to be a volume guy. We kind of drafted my notes on this. It would not surprise me if he moves way up or he's a complete bust. That's exactly what we thought he was going to be coming in this year in the draft. So, this is where I would rank him. He's probably going to have his weeks. I think that overall, without him, the offense has generated this identity of what Dobbs does, or Dubs, whatever, and Luke Musgrave is going to do attacking the seam, and Aaron Jones being in there as this hybrid running pass weapon, and then Jaden Reed. So Christian Watson is going to have his big games, but again, there's going to probably be other weeks where he just doesn't get enough volume for it to matter. Moving on, I have Drake London here, and again, I think Drake London is one of the better wide receivers in the league, but sometimes it just doesn't matter how. And if he's not going to get the opportunity, and the offense is bad, it doesn't matter. And you're playing with fire if you roll them out, and you probably already know that. Zay Jones I have down here, and again, the injury, the offense may not be as good. I still think that there's enough talent there to pull him through, but sometimes it doesn't matter what I think. And just putting him out here in this range to know going forward that, again, this is a guy that could move up, be in the fringe of a wide receiver 2, or almost fall off the fantasy radar. I could see either one of those happening at this point. Marvin Mims is another one, boom bust at this point. I believe I have this to show when it comes to overall rank. His efficiency is still ridiculous. Marvin Mims is wide receiver 22 on advanced metrics. And from the standpoint of how many actual snaps percentage he's done and targets, which is ridiculous. So again, he has to be on the radar. Again, this is probably coaching. I don't know why they're not trying to get him the ball more in that offense as bad as it is. Van Jefferson, I still have to keep here because there's still a possibility because of his size and speed that he is the guy that is not the odd man out between him and Tutu Atwell with Cooper Kupp coming back. So that's why I would rank him here in this boom bust wide receiver 3 range. But again, I could see him just completely falling off the fantasy radar. I have Trey Palmer here. Again, this is speculative based off of Mike Evans' hamstring and his snap percentage going forward. This is where I originally had Gabe Davis, and I have it written down. I think we know what Gabe Davis is, and some of the other guys we don't. That's why I had him here. But then I looked at the metrics and the production, and I had to move him up just to give you an idea about how difficult it can be to rank wide receivers. And there's probably a lot of matchups that are going to go on in trying to be predictive with guys outside of certain ranges moving forward. So then the other guy that kind of surprised me in this range is Michael Gallup. So he was basically non-existent for the first 2 games, and then he put up 2 wide receiver 2 numbers. So again, this boom bust range of knowing what you're getting with good offenses, and this is a good offense that doesn't necessarily need to even be good, but production-wise, he needs to be here. I have Quentin Johnson here, again, speculative. The wide receiver 3 in a high volume passing offense that could move up the pecking order as the season goes on. So he's going to have a spike week. It may not be predictive, but just know that it's there because of the opportunity. I have Rashee Rice and Sky Moore right next to each other right now. Rashee Rice is probably the guy to own, but they're probably both going to be non-predictive because of the Kansas City situation, and that's fine. Sky Moore's got you there once, and he's been a 40-degree day once with 2 absolute busts. And Rashee Rice has had 2 40-degree days with 2 low-end whatevers. So like they have to be in this range of knowing that because they're attached to the offense that they are, you're going to have this massive week. And if it's on your bench or on the waiver wire, it just doesn't matter. And that's kind of the same thought process with Treylon Burks. He showed enough at the NFL level that like he can put up that spike week. The opportunity's not going to be there. He's been injured, but there's enough there to know that like there's always a chance, you know. It's really hard to explain. And the same thing when I'm getting to these very low end boom bust wide receiver 3. Alec Pierce in that offense, he's going to catch a deep shot. The main thing to look at when I have a guy like Alec Pierce here is the snap percentage. 92, 100, 96, 91. Everybody else can throw out all the metrics that they want on like ADOT and this, that, and ever. It doesn't matter. Being on the field and having that much of the defense suck up on Anthony Richardson or Jonathan Taylor is going to allow this guy to get deep on play action. It's going to happen, especially because he's just going to be on the field. Tyler Boyd has to be in this group right now of boom bust wide receiver 3s. If T. Higgins is out, even on a bad offense, he could move into that target share. So somebody to talk about. Brandon Cooks is another interesting thing. Pieces of good offenses. And, I want pieces of good offenses. And the Cowboys may be a good offense going up against San Francisco, the Chargers, the Rams, Philadelphia in the next 4 games. And then to finish this tier off, we have Calvin Austin. And the snap percentage is up to 90. He's not getting a lot of targets. When he's gotten his opportunity in week 3, he caught his one big pass. He's a boom bust guy in the biggest sense of them all. But since, again, he's on the field, he's getting his deeper shots, we know what he is. Rolling a guy out there and hoping that it's his week is not the worst idea in the world. So then to finish this, the wide receivers off these tiers, there's a few other guys we have to talk about. So Seattle coming out of the bye might better integrate JSN. The draft capital's there. The talent, I think, is there. Somebody to talk about, especially some of you guys might be more concerned with him in dynasty leagues. He might end up eating into Tyler Lockett's share as the season goes on. Tyler Lockett at 31 is past the wide receiver age apex. The guy I'm slightly more interested in is Jake Bobo. I was listening to a podcast the other day. They're basically using him as a blocking tight end, like a big blocking wide receiver tight end in their goal line packages. So that means like the receiving or the red zone work is going to be there. And if he continues to just chew into the snap percentage, there's going to be production to go along with it. And from a very weird perspective, JSN and Bobo are going to be like a poor man's Lockett and DK going forward. So it's a guy to kind of just keep him on your radar on the back end. I have Odell Beckham and Rashad Bateman to go along with Zay Flowers. The schedule going forward for the Baltimore Ravens, they're going to get in some games where they might actually have to function as a real offense. Denver, maybe Arizona, Seattle, maybe Cleveland, maybe Cincinnati, maybe the Chargers and the Rams. And at that case, that actual number 2 target for the Ravens is going to have value. And even though we haven't seen it yet, trying to predict that ahead of time is going to be very difficult based off of what's going on right now. Then I have Jamison Williams here. He's got the capital and he's going to have those spike weeks. You can probably say like in a way, this is a poor man's Christian Washington at this point. But he's going to eventually integrate in there and help the offense, taking the top off the defense. So be aware of that. And the same thing I have written down here for Chark, Mingo, and Terrence Marshall for the Panthers. The coaches eventually have to figure out a way to get out. A coach aware of a brown paper bag, and they got to figure it out. They can't have the ghost of Adam Thielen being the guy. So way down here, like Chark with 92% snaps, even though they were bad. Mingo didn't even play week 4 or 5, but again, the draft capital is there, and the same thing with Marshall is getting opportunity. One of these guys might emerge, and it's just something to pay attention to, and that's the same reason why I have Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, and Jalen Wyatt. As bad as this offense is, like if these guys want to keep their jobs, they have to figure it out. And I like all these guys. It just doesn't translate into rankings. And finally, I just have like no Patriots guys whatsoever. So anyway, those are my rankings, and hopefully this has some benefits to somebody out there.